What's up, you guys? This is Simon. On this episode of the Ideal Hour, I have someone very special, Dain Walker, who has one of the fastest growing brand marketing agencies in Australia, if not the fastest growing one. He's also the host of the Tiger Table podcast. I love that name. Has a book coming out called the 90-Day Brand Plan, and he is the founder and principal of Rivyl, which is the marketing company that we talked about earlier. Dain, thanks for coming on. Let's start out with why branding is important.
It's extremely important for any and all businesses, and oftentimes branding gets misconstrued with a lot of other things. And when you have a lot of, let's just say, false teachers in the market teaching what their interpretation of branding is, it damages the reputation of what people might assume it is, right? So if I just go back to like just the fundamental teachings in our industries to some of the greats, like if you look at Seth Godin, Simon Sinek, if you look at Marty Neumeier, like these guys really understand the fundamentals, Alan Dibbs, just to name a few, and there's some other amazing, incredible authors out there. And essentially branding is like the feeling you get in your gut. That's what Marty Neumeier like says branding. It's a feeling, right? So if you walk into a store, a shoe store, and you see a blank shoe, and then you see a shoe exactly the same next to it, but it has a Nike swoosh, like, why are you buying that? Like, really, it's really a difficult question to answer. Like, if you have ever met someone, and I love doing this when I see people with a Rolex, you go up to them and you're like, why did you buy that Rolex? And they're like, oh, like it's a reminder of like how hard I work. And I'm like, bro, that's a status symbol. The only reason a guy would buy a Rolex is he's trying to flaunt his status. That's it.
Absolutely. And I have, I've done like Rolex reviews, a review of my Rolex collection on YouTube before I started this podcast. Absolutely agree with you. People buy it. I mean, it might boost that person's confidence as well. It may kind of get them in the room of some level of importance in that room, right? Someone may notice that knows this type of stuff, but you're totally right. You're only doing it. It doesn't tell better time is what you're saying.
Yeah. So yeah, no one buys a Rolex to tell time, right? So like, for example, I'm actually on the market looking to buy one because I know the power it has. And I'm in rooms all the time where people have them. And it's like, if you walk into, and as ridiculous as it sounds, if you walk into a room and there's successful people in that room and they see a Rolex on your wrist, it says a hell of a lot about you. That's branding, right? Why does it say a hell of a lot? Well, it becomes a symbol or a beacon of like, hey, I belong in this tribe. I'm successful and I'm a hustler and I do whatever it takes and I've earned this and I've earned my stripes in the business world, whatever that might be, right? It's like you buy things that communicate I belong in this tribe. Like, why would I buy a Harley Davidson or buy a pair of Air Jordans? Why would I go buy a Tesla? Like, I'm communicating, hey, I belong in this tribe. It's a gut feeling. So I think oftentimes when people say and lump branding into marketing or lump branding into advertising or lump branding into sales, it's like, well, it's a separate thing. It's almost like if you have an engine with 4 cylinders, branding is its own cylinder, right?
It's so distinctive. I agree with you. If you took, let's say, a Rolex Skydweller or Rolex Submariner or any of these Rolex watches, which you're currently looking into, as you mentioned, and you take that crown off the top of the watch, you still know that that's generally a Rolex type presentation. And then you're saying it goes deeper than that, right? It makes the person why would you spend $10,000+? That's like a feeling that they've developed for you to make you want to spend that amount of money for whatever you're getting back out of it, right? As mentioned, it's not really the accuracy of time, because from what I've even read and seen, the Rolex needs to be recalibrated every so often, while your Casio watch may be perfectly timed a year or two later. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I appreciate you sharing that. Let's get in a little bit. There might be people watching that are like not understanding branding as the level of marketing. I personally get it because I've ran businesses. But what would you say to an entrepreneur that's younger, that's really getting into trying to get his brand across, whether it's personal brand or a company brand? How would what should they start looking at, or what are the first steps to understanding your brand and the importance of the brand?
Distinction here is like personal branding and company branding this is debated a lot, but my opinion is they're respectably different. Play the same game, but they have different strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, if you're like, okay, I'm gonna play, RuneScape or like, a Lord of the Rings game, am I choosing the warrior or the wizard? Right? Personal branding and company branding, they have different strengths and weaknesses, in my opinion. So I would just make that clear distinction. So I'll kind of tell you what needs to exist in both. So I believe that, branding is kind of like an onion, right? It's got a core and it's got all these layers. So like, at the surface, when you look at an onion, you can only see the top layer. Like you can't see what's in it. You know what I mean? But the nutrients in it is what gave that outer layer the strength and the ability for it to like, be as strong as it is, right? If you try to like squeeze an onion, you can't crush it because it's reinforced by all these different layers. So the internal core of your brand really comes down to 5 key principles. Number 1, who does it exist for? At the time, they're like, well, we anyone could buy this product. And it's like, okay, well, anyone could buy a pair of Nikes, Harley Davidson, anyone could go to Starbucks, anyone could buy a Rolex. If they really wanted to, they could put it on finance and buy a Rolex. You know what I mean? Like anyone could buy them, but these brands don't exist for anyone. They exist for someone. That's branding. It's a key distinction, is like, who does it exist for? A Rolex exists so that predominantly a man could buy a status. A Harley Davidson exists so someone could express that they love freedom. Starbucks actually exists for the white collar person who lives in a city. Sure, grandma, grandpa, students, and everyone else can go to Starbucks. They're welcome to. But their marketing technology, and it actually stipulates this in their marketing, like we exist in like districts where there's a lot of blue collar employees that work at law firms or what have you that like want to get 5-6 coffees a day. Back to the onion. One of the principles at the core of your onion, of your branding, is like, who the hell do you exist for? Okay, so like in Nike's case, we exist predominantly for athletes or those that want to feel like they're on the pursuit or a journey like an athlete, right? If you go back to the origins of Nike at the beginning, it was hardcore only for runners. Then a few other sports. Then it kind of opened up to general sports. Now, some of their marketing is like anyone can pursue greatness. So now they've got, monopoly in the mind of the world that Nike's this cool thing. They can kind of dilute themselves. But at the very beginning, at the very precipice of you building your company, you should probably like tilt right into a specific hardcore thing. And I think generalize later, but like at least niche in the beginning, my opinion.
You can't be too broad. You're not going to capture any audience potentially and spend your advertising dollars, or even, your plan would be too broad. It wouldn't be very distinct. But number 2, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and just to I guess like put a stamp on that, it's like if you target everyone, you target no one. We love brands that represent something, that stand for something, have an opinion. And you could say, well, what about Amazon? They exist for everyone. Well, it's like, okay, but like, there are rule breakers. But most of the time, if you're starting up, you can't start up with the whole market.
Amazon exists for me and a bunch of stay-at-home moms and that love shopping, because I have a problem with it. But I agree with you.
Yeah, but people throw these arguments back. They're like, what about Amazon? What about Coca-Cola? I'm like, yeah, but like, is your law firm like that's in a city that's surrounded by like, like blue collar, like people coming to you for like, corporate law, like, or if you're starting a product to sell supplements, everyone at the gym, or is it for the yoga instructor, or is it for the gym bro, or is it for the lifestyle fitfluencer? Number 2 is like really understanding like, what is your specialty? Like what makes you, what gives you an X factor? Like what's your sizzle? I try to tell people like, find a thing, right? Like, if you look at brands that have things, it's especially like shows up in fashion, right? Yeah. If you look at like Gucci, they have the pattern. If you look at Louis Vuitton, I believe it's Louis Vuitton, it's the red bottom heels.
That's Christian Louboutin, but it's close. Yes. My wife has those. That's how I know. Okay.
No, I agree. I'm glad you caught me on that, because being a brand guy.
My wife made me buy one pair of Christian Louboutin men's shoes with spikes and a red bottom, and it cost me $1,000. Yeah. Guess how many times I've worn that? Once. I wish I got a nice coffee machine instead. So, but go ahead.
Well, it has resale value, so maybe it's a collector's, right? Yeah. The point is, like, they have the red bottom heels. See, our X factor is if you look at the competitors of Rivyl, they're very like clean, minimalistic, and kind of like, like refined and sophisticated, you go to our website, we have like trash bags and rips and like texture. Like it's very different. So like it could be a promise, it could be a reputation, it could be a product. Like it's like try to find something that makes you unique. Third, I think it's very important that it's like as you build your brand, you really have to understand how do we communicate between that sizzle and the target audience. Like, what's our strategy? What's our voice? Like, how do we speak? How do we connect? How do we resonate with those people? And I think, you know, if you have your sizzle, like, okay, this is the thing we're amazing at. We crush our competitors at this thing. We provide a better service, a better whatever it might be. And then for the consumer, it's like, this is our consumer. This is who they are. Well, like, okay, how do we bridge between the two so that that person cares about the product? It's like, well, how do we speak to them? That's when it goes into like, what do we do on social media? What do we do with our website? So for example, if you take Liquid Death, you're like, okay, well, who's the audience for Liquid Death? Like, in your opinion, who would you say is the audience of Liquid Death?
Well, someone that probably a male, right? And that loves more energetic music, I would say. I'm bad at branding, but you tell me.
Yeah, so I think like people that are really attracted to Liquid Death, they love shock value. They love things that are gnarly and crazy. Maybe they're skateboarders, metalheads. They love going to Burning Man. I don't know, like they're kind of maybe more youthful. They like things that are humorous and silly. So then it's like, okay, well, the product is it's just water in a can, right? But what makes that interesting? Well, no one else has really put water in a can and made it fun. Maybe they've got water in a can, but it's tranquil, it's peaceful, you know, it's calming.
How do you market that
You know,
water in a can is what you're saying to
Yeah.
or how do you differentiate?
So they wrap the can with this brand name that says Liquid Death, like a flying skull that's on fire. So like anyone who likes gnarly stuff is like, oh, I can buy water with a skull on it that says Liquid Death. That's cool. That's gnarly. You know, that's the resonance between the product and the consumer. You see what I mean? That voice. So that voice, it could be colors, it could be fonts, it could be visuals, it could be a name, it could be catchphrases and taglines and marketing material.
I'm gonna tell you right now, I thought Liquid Death was a band I've heard before, not the drink. So I'll be honest with you and throw that out there. That's cool that they captured that through a label, which is insane.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then what's 5?
Yeah, so that's 3. So the first one is so target consumer, how you speak to them, and like what's your X factor, your specialty, your thing, your promise, right? I think number 4, just to kind of like summarize this, it's really understanding like what's the emotional pull, right? Okay. So like if you think about that tribe member, who do they become when they buy your brands? Right, you got to really think about this. It's like, what's the belief? Like, who do they become?
You could get that back into Rolex. Like, you buy that first Rolex, let's say. Who have you become because you bought a Rolex? Right now, you're in a board meeting. Are you Dain with a Rolex? And how does that make you feel? Right?
Yeah, and I've had friends that have bought a Rolex and their confidence goes through the roof in meetings. I think it's interesting. It's like, well, did the Rolex make them a better person? No, they believed they were more of a person because they bought a product. And this comes back to human nature. It's like we're tribal creatures, right? Yeah. So there's hierarchy and all the rest of it. There's a pecking order in business. So I think like, you know, psychologically, who do I become if I buy your product? Yeah. I think it's really important to note that. And at the end, I think it's talking about like, what's the big vision above all of it? Like, why all of these things? Like the big why above all of it, right? So Apple was like, we believe in thinking different. So the big arching umbrella above all of those things is like, why? Why is this even a thing? You know, Harley Davidson, it's freedom. Nike, it's the pursuit of greatness, right? So whether it's John Deere tractors, nothing runs like a deer. Like, what's the big point of this brand? And I think if you can nail those 5 things and really build something exciting with those 5 things, that's the core of the onion. Then everything else is just layers. The logo's a layer, the colors are a layer, the fonts are a layer. Like, these are all just additional layers of communication that hold the core of your brand.
Would you say, you've probably had customers that have first started marketing or thinking they know their brand and then hiring a firm like yours and they're totally surprised about maybe their brand or they need direction. Would you say this
Yeah.
happens often where brand is overlooked before the marketing?
I think it's drastically overlooked. Um, I think because, and I get it, like as a business owner, you're trying to make, things end at the end of the month in a high. Like, like as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're just trying to survive. Like you're thinking about so many things. You're thinking about ads, you're thinking about sales, you're thinking about marketing, you're thinking about your team, your wages, like overheads. So like, sometimes branding can kind of like topple down the list of priorities. And I think the reason that is because it's not always an immediate thing. Like branding takes time. You could run an ad today and see results tonight by midnight, and you're like, okay, the ads are working, right? You get an immediate feedback. It's working, right? Same with marketing. Branding, it's not really immediate. Compliment or say something like, oh, I like the logo, that's dope. But you're like, yeah, but was it the reason they bought it? So I think just like speaking business owner language, I just think it topples down the list of priorities because it's like usually most business owners, especially in startup phase or scaling phase, all of their focus is in producing the income, providing the service or product for a client. And then it's like, usually at some point they realize like, oh, our branding is hurting us now. Like the amount of times I get on a call and they're like, hey, we went from like 0 to like 30 employees in the last 2 years. Now we're like, what do we do with the website? It's not converting as well as it could, or our social media doesn't really have a goal, or kind of sucks. It's usually they get to a certain point where they get to like zoom out of their business and go, it kind of looks like shit. And then they're like, we need to do
looking
branding.
at the onion from the outside at this point.
Yeah, it
going
doesn't
like,
look any good.
What's happening?
It's like this mangled.
Yeah.
Like it looks horrible, and they're like, maybe we should.
Maybe we should have called Dain. What were we doing? I totally agree with you. I would say that, and you could correct me. I mean, you're the specialist at this. For me, it sounds like branding is like the foundation almost of a house build. I mean, yeah, you could envision this really nice house, but without really knowing the structure that's going to hold it up or what it really will, maybe the most important part that's not seen, right, in most of these builds in real estate space. If you don't have the foundation of what you're trying to achieve in the beginning, and maybe branding is part of that, it's almost like throwing something at a wall and hope it sticks without really understanding your core customer, without understanding your image, without understanding your color schemes, who your target audience is, and so forth. It's kind of like going on, Instagram and boosting a post for everybody, right? That's not going to work.
Right.
You have to really dilute and understand your brand. I appreciate you sharing that. Typically, I know this is a range of extremes, right, Dain? So how much does your firm typically charge a small business, or like where are you in the range? Like what is someone, if I'm looking for a brand and I have, let's say, $1 million company, 1 million revenue a year, what's a typical cost for brand, or is it brand building? Is it build monthly, hourly? What do you guys typically provide as a package?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different options out there in the market, and there's everything from like freelancers. There's some amazing freelancers out there that are like one man operations, one gal operations, where it's just like they do the whole thing, And typically, like a freelancer will range, from my experience, like a good brand strategist / designer, like someone who can like write beautiful copy, design beautiful design, and put it in a nice guideline for you and train you on how to deploy it and do some research for you. Like a good one should be at least charging you $10,000 to $15,000 at least.
A month.
At least. No, just total.
Total. Like a consulting fee, so to speak.
Let's just say I was a freelancer. I didn't have an office. I didn't have team. I didn't have overheads. It was just me and like my MacBook in my house, and I'm like working for me. I would say like anyone who's not saying, give me $15,000 to do your brands, going to do a good job. Right? So someone who's really worth their weight as a freelancer. And what I mean by this is like that freelancer, think about it. They have to do good research. They have to come up with a good strategy. They have to do a good logo. They have to do good packaging and a good design and put it into a cohesive kit. If that person were to get hired at a full-time job, that's like a $160,000 job a year. If you hired that person full-time, it's 160 grand. If you pay them to build the brands, 15 grand, I would say.
And what's a typical turnaround time? Would you say a good freelancer would turn around and give you a product?
Yeah, depending how busy they are, I think a good freelancer could do it in probably 8 to 12 weeks, giant Rolodex, and then not juggling a bunch of stuff. Branding usually takes a good brand where it's done properly with the right people about 3 months.
How important is that lately with everyone being an influencer on Instagram, you know, having a Lamborghini, whatever it is out there? How important is personal brand today to you?
Happening in the world right now, you know, social media is at scale, right? Like if we rewind, let's just say 5 years ago, people were still discussing like, should I get on social media? And if you look around yourself in business right now, who in the business world is asking that question anymore? The question has changed, and I'll tell you what it's changed to. That it changed from should I start a social media page to should I start a personal brand? Right? I noticed that about 3 to 4 years ago, a business owner started asking me, "Hey Dain, should I start a personal brand?" Should. Now that question is, Dain, how do I start a personal brand? No. This is all in 5 years. It's going from should I go on social media with my company to should I add a personal brand maybe to how the hell do I start one? Why?
And it's almost like, am I too late to start one? Because now everybody else has one, right?
Yeah.
So it's that important. That's great. Let's talk about you've mentioned some pillars of a personal brand, and we related it to brands like Coca-Cola, Starbucks, and so forth earlier in this episode.
Right.
What about personal brand? Is it the same principles for starting a personal brand, or is it a little bit different?
Yeah, I think personal branding's been around a hell of a lot longer than we've realized. I think it's just not really been termed or coined as like this common phrase, right? If you were in Manhattan, you know, in the 90s, and you were Nike, and you're like, hey, like how do we sell more shoes? We were like, yo, we need a personal identity, like a Michael Jordan, right? So for example, why has Nike kept its relevance for such a long time in the market? It's not because of their swoosh, right? It's a beautiful logo. It's because they constantly attach themselves to the latest, hottest up-and-coming athlete, right? Michael Jordan did wonders for Nike, right? They attached themselves to Michael Jordan. It's like Michael wears it, whatever he does, I'm buying, right? You know what I mean? Whatever he reps, I'm repping. The thing happened with Serena Williams. The same thing happens with these athletes. So I believe that for a long time in the marketplace, you know, big brands like have been using David Beckham, or they've been using, you know, like these celebrities like the Spice Girls to like endorse their products. And like, you know, if you went into, you know, think about it, like if you're a teenager and you're flicking through a magazine when you're like 15, 16, you see the Spice Girls wearing something, you're like, whatever they're wearing, I'm buying. Not me personally, but like, so as a kid, like I remember, I think I was like 6 years old and I was watching television and I saw it like, and this is like 1996, 1995. I just see this giant like launching through the air and slam dunking balls. And I'm like, who is this guy? And then my uncle's like, oh, that's Michael Jordan. And he gave me a Bulls cap, right? Wow. And I saw the cool logo on the Bulls cap. I put it on my head and I just was like, man, that's cool. Like anything that guy does, I want to buy. So there's a reason I'm sharing this. So to kind of like tie this all together, personal branding is like, it's different because we follow people, right? Like if you go on social media, you don't go on social media to follow companies. You go on social media to follow people. What are other people doing? Who can I talk with? Who can I hang out with? What are my friends up to? What's the band I love up to? What's the celebrity I love up to? What's Gary Vee up to? What's Hormozy up to, right? You know, you want to be seeing these people. And I think what makes people interesting is they have origin stories, right? They've gone through some kind of transition. They've moved from like being unknown through to the new world to creating themselves as a character. And they have enemies and they have weaknesses and vulnerabilities and they have allies. Like if you look at Gary Vee, he, you know, went from obscurity for working for his dad in a wine shop, learning how to use the internet and learning how to use Google AdWords, and then had Wine Library TV on YouTube, and then like created his own universe.
Created his own brand, really. He became a different brand animal, a beast, I would say, in that whole space.
So what I believe people can do as an advantage over maybe a company is they can create a world that other people want to be in that doesn't feel like it's being sold to them. Right? Because if Nike create a world, you're like, yeah, this is a company trying to sell me something. Hey, here's a bunch of content. Here's a conference, here's books, here's materials and a podcast. You're like, Gary's not trying to sell me anything. He's just inviting me into.
He's just a nice
He's
guy
just a nice guy.
that loves wine. I love wine. I'll listen to him. It's a good story.
And
there.
if you look at the data, it's something like, I think it's like 87% of people that go onto social media don't trust social media pages run by companies. 92% of people will consider buying a product because someone they admire on social media has one or suggested they should get it.
It's so interesting because they've associated a brand with whatever they're seeing, right? They've associated, say, the Nike shoe, the Nike company, etc. But they've associated themselves as if they're a friend of this individual because they constantly keep seeing this individual, and therefore they're trusting him. And I think there was a study done that if you see the same person X amount of times, and I think it was somewhere like around 20 times, they're constantly in your feed, you begin to like think that you're friends with this person, or you begin to think you know this person, right?
Like for example, like if you listen to, let's just say, your favorite podcast from your favorite host, but then you consume that podcast for like, let's just say 15 minutes a day for like 3 months, your brain does not know the difference whether that person is real in your life or not, because you've watched their content, you've seen their face, you've seen their expressions, you've learn their vocabulary, you know their story. That's why when you see famous people in public and people run up to them screaming, "Can I take a photo with you?" is because their brain's just like, I know this person. Seeing this, I've been with celebrities when this is happening. It's crazy. It's just like people don't know how to behave and act, and then their brain's just in overwhelm.
They get like this trance or something.
In a trance, they're like, their body's like, I know this person. They're my friend, and it's like, but are they? And they don't know me.
I had somebody recognized me in Miami walking down the street randomly with my kids and wife going to like a coffee shop, and I got into a trance. I was like, because that's never happened to me. I'm not, you know what I mean? I was like, I don't know. You know, it was weird. But I totally agree. I think that once you add this component of someone really following you, they think they know you, they start really associating themselves with you, and they trust you for some reason more versus like a logo, right?
Do you want to know the recipe to it? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
So like this is actually from Disney. So for a long time, Disney has like a model that they use. You should be able to pull it up on Google at some point. Maybe I'll email you. I've got a copy of it. I'll email it to you. It's this giant wheel, and basically on the left hand side, it's like every character that Marvel creates or Disney creates has to flesh out this whole wheel. And in the wheel, it basically says, what's the origin story, right? Batman was an orphan. Spider-Man's parents passed away and raised by his uncle, auntie. You know, Superman, like sent from the planet, whatever, right? Like everyone has these origin stories, and then they have some kind of like transformation, right? Where they went from being ordinary to extraordinary. And then they go from the normal world to the new world, right? Old world to new. This is important. And then in the new world, it's like, okay, they have attributes, they have strengths, they have vulnerabilities, and they also have like defining attributes. And then on that wheel, so if you imagine left through to right, so on the left-hand side is the origin story, old world. The right-hand side of the wheel, if you cut it into 4 quadrants, is the new world. It's like strengths and attributes, strengths and vulnerabilities, and like kind of the definitive character. Then above that is like allies and support, and then below that is like enemies and nemesises and villains, right? So if you take Spider-Man through that wheel, right? Tough upbringing, bitten by a spider, learns he's got a superpower, gets catchphrases, gets the Spider-Man outfit, right? He goes through this journey, and he's got his friends and allies, he's got enemies he's fighting. But if you take Gary Vee through the same wheel, he actually fleshes out the entire wheel perfectly, right? He's got his origin story with his parents from Belarus. He's got the transformation story of the internet, and he goes from the old world to the new world, pre-internet, post-internet. And what he did with the internet, he's got, think about it, he's got catchphrases, he's got the defining attributes, he's got the outfit, he's got vulnerabilities, he tells you his vulnerabilities on stage. Then he's got his allies, he's got D-Rock, and his nemesis is not having patience. His nemesis is not having awareness. His nemesis is procrastination. He's fighting these metaphorical enemies. Now, if you take Alex Hormozy, you take anyone like Oprah, you take Serena Williams, Michael Jordan, you can put all of them through that wheel. The reason I'm sharing this is if you want to build a personal brand, you have to fill out that whole wheel.
So you're almost creating a Disney character of yourself. So you're taking their
Exactly.
structure, and you have to be the Disney character or that structure to build something to show that you've overcame something to.
The reason Disney do that is because they have an hour and a half to make you fall in love with the character on the screen. How do we get children to fall in love with this character so much so that they don't just watch the movie once, they watch it again? So like when you're a child 3 or 4, they don't know this character's not real. I've literally seen my daughter fall in love with characters like Moana. In her mind, she's like, I want it on my bed sheets. I want it on my backpack. So as silly as that sounds, it's like that's happening with Joe Rogan. That's happening with Gary Vee. Like people are falling in love with this character because they filled the whole wheel out. If you want to become a solid, strong, reputable personal brand, you have to flesh out your whole wheel and you have to make it public. You have to let people know your story.
And I think that's why I think we were talking about it. Either me and you or me and Cam were talking about it earlier, where that's David Meltzer's story, where he's lost it all.
Yes.
He's come back, and it's really interesting because he's probably done that and completed that circle, and it makes sense, and people keep coming back. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Dain. You opened my eyes to that. Now I gotta not only look at your chart, but figure out where I am in this hamster wheel of personal brands. Let's talk a little bit. You have a book coming out. Cam made sure I mention it. It's coming out in May. What is this about? It's called the 90-Day Brand Plan. Obviously
Correct.
about branding. But what's your goal?
Yeah.
Why write a book? Why not just keep with podcasts or whatever, or teach people in speaking events as you do? Why the book?
Yeah, the book actually started off as a joke. So what happened was like, people would always ask me like, "Hey Dain, how do I start a personal brand?" And I would just say, post every day for 90 days. Like just commit to 3 months, marry the idea, and just post every day for 90 days. And they're like, "But how?" And I'm like, "Post." And they're like, "How?" So then I started a challenge where I started to say to people like, "Look, I'll kind of like mentor you, right? We'll check in once a week. I'll see how you go. I'll give you some ideas." And the joke was like, every day if you commit to this, if you really want me to like push you to do this, we're making a contractual agreement. They're like, "What's the contractual agreement?" And it's like, well, okay, if you miss a day, every day you miss, you eat a dog biscuit. And they're like, But everyone I've done this with, they're like, "Dan's going to keep me accountable to this thing." So it was enough fear for them to like post every day, And they would text me or DM me, "I posted today. Just, I don't want to eat those." So then I started to like take it seriously because like people were like, okay, like, "Hey, I posted every day for like 2 weeks. Like, here's the data. Like, what do you think?" And I was just, I did this journey myself, and I've actually done this for years with like thousands of people, like just helping them to just get started on their personal branding journey. And it all literally, weirdly enough, just get some content out there. It doesn't matter what it's about, but like just get in the rhythm of like what I call kicking the ball, right?
Okay.
If I give you a soccer ball, you kick it long enough, you learn how to use it. People are like, "How do I build a personal brand?" But they don't want to make content. They want to nail the brands, then build the content. And I'm like, no. Make content, then you'll nail the brands.
And the brand the brand may change, right? Like somewhere along the line, there's pivots and shifts, especially in the personal brand.
Look how many times Gary Vee's changed his brand, or Hormozi's changed his brand, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? He was a bodybuilder, and then he was a movie star, and then he's the governor, like giving advice, like
He's going to be speaking, and he just came out with a book. But you're right, they do. They change their brand, and it's common. So your brand will get changed.
The book is like how to start your journey as a personal brand. It covers a lot of what we talked about, like regarding like building your character and all the rest of it. It's about how to start posting content, how to figure out what your niche is. So like, how do I identify my thing? How do I know what like makes my brand me, and like how do I own that? Then how to like I make content. Then how do I monetize my content by offering services or products? And then how do I turn it into a business? And I built my personal brands from like working a full-time job in debt to having 72,000 USD in a PayPal at day 90 of doing this. And I'm just like, I did this for myself. It's part my story, part me mentoring others. And then I was like, rather than trying to like create some kind of expensive online program, I'm just going to write a book and make it available to everyone, because it's pretty elementary stuff. It's just a bit of it's like a recipe book on how to make a personal brand, how to cook one up.
It's awesome that you're doing that. And I think a lot of people need some type of guidance. I don't know if I'm sure there's a lot of personal brand books, but having an individual that not only understands the the landscape of the company brand building, but also the personal and how they both play, it's probably going to be a hit. And it comes out in May, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so it's with Wiley Publishing, comes out in May, and it's exciting. We're gonna release it in audio form.
What's the
it's been, like,
challenges? What's the challenges here of writing a book? I've never written one,
oh
but
man, really interesting. I think the difficult thing for me was I had so much material. I had 4 years of like written material, content I created, and also like I decided, similarly to branding, I was like, okay, well, who am I writing this for? Back into my core, I'm like, who am I writing it for? And for me, it was like, okay, it's kind of like two brackets. It's like someone who runs a company who wants to add a personal brand, or someone who has neither, who wants to build a personal brand so that they can have a company. And it's I ideally for like the entrepreneurial hearted person who's really wanting to give it a good crack. It's definitely someone that's not faint-hearted, that likes to run at challenges, run at fear, and tackle things. So I'm like, that's kind of the target audience. How do I need to speak to them? Well, I really need to make it elementary. I don't want to be academic. I don't want to be like, trying to. I think some books can be too academic or too kind of like high level. I'm like, I just want to break it down to the steps. Let's just get to work. All of like the, spending hours upon hours like ideating it. Let's just start working, right? Then it's like, how do I speak to them? So it's like very candid. It's kind of humorous and funny and like playful. And then, what makes the book special? Well, the book's special because it's very visual. So I've written it in a very visual way, and there's a lot of like visual diagrams and exercises throughout the book to make it really engaging. And I've spent a lot of time in this. I engineered the book in a way where if you read it once and you don't really remember what was said in the book, you'll definitely remember the visuals, and you'll definitely remember the metaphors. They're really sticky. We've tested this, and people like, they remember the book. They remember each chapter. They're like, oh, chapter 6, you talk about this with the thing, and like the cash cow, and like it's super visual. So I've just made it really easy for anyone to read on a flight.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think the visual aspect is such a key point. I remember kind of mental memory. There was some advice I read where you would picture something in your house and place it there, and you'd name it that, right? And then upstairs is a different picture. So that's kind of in line with someone reading your books. Like, wait a minute, that is the picture of a sword. The sword says, the branding needs to start at point A or something like that.
I think that's what my content's all about. So like if you look at my carousels or when I do a keynote, I don't like to just flourish things with visuals that don't make any sense. I like to use visuals that like say something. I geek out on this. I'm like I'll even, ask my illustrator. He's like, oh my God, like I'm scrutinizing. I'm like, no, it needs to be more like this because that'll tilt the psychology in this direction. He's like, oh my God, but we've today just almost finalized the illustration. But dude, like to answer your question, like what's the process of writing a book? Well, there's my process because I'm like anally retentive. I'm like, I want this thing to be, an expression of branding, and I want it to be really fun, and I don't want it to just be a boring thing that collects dust on the shelf. I want people to like flick through it at the airport and be like, what the but it's hard, man. It took months, and I'll just tell you what, like definitely like the best advice I could give is like identify the predominant challenges the readers are going to have, and then break those challenges into a step-by-step process from chapter 1 through to 12. And like ramp up the difficulty. That's how I wrote the book.
Good for you, man. Good for you. Really excited to see it come out. Definitely let me get a copy, or I'll buy a copy to support you, of course. Let's talk about some keynote speaking. You've done some keynote speaking events. Do you ever get nervous? Are they fun? How are you captivating the audience in that short amount of time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, I'm naturally an introvert, right? And my mentor is Chris Do. So I don't know if you know Chris, but he kind of jokes. He's like, he calls himself the loud introvert, right? He's very introverted, but he's very loud about it. So then he's trained himself. So similarly to him, I love nothing more, dude, than to be like alone with a book or walking my dog like I like being an introvert. I'm very deep in thought, and I've trained myself to be extroverted, if that makes sense. So like, for me, I think it's like, as you're expressing yourself as an individual on a stage, what I find is important is that you're really not there for a selfish reason. Like I learned this from Chris. It's like you have to think about like one person in the room and talk to them.
Yeah.
And it really takes the nerves away, because when you're starting to think about, okay, I'm speaking to this big crowd of like 1,000 or 3,000 people. When you speak to a crowd, you get what I call crowd voice. It's when you're like, it's like, all right, guys, so we're gonna, like this like crowd voicey fake persona kind of thing. It's like when you turn on to the news and like today on the news, like it's like news voice or crowd voice. So I personally have a disdain for crowd voice, and I'm like, how do I get up on stage and just like talk like their friend would talk to them?
Yeah.
And you'll notice the best speakers do this. Like Hormozi's really great at this. Gary Vee's really good at this. They're just themselves, and they're talking to like one person, right? And this is why Gary loves Q&A, because he'll just zone in on like talking to one person, but it's relevant to everyone. So I noticed like when I really started to deploy that, it took the nerves away. The second thing is what I like to do on stage is have a lot of visual aids, not like a lot of words or dot points. Like I kind of hate that. I'll have like one word and like a cool visual diagram. And the visual diagram will say a lot, and I'll just speak to it. It's like a set for what I'm saying. It's a character in my story. So I think that's my method. But what I would say for anyone who's looking to learn how to do keynotes, look up a guy named Vin Yang or Vin Jiang. He actually teaches this, and I've spent some time with him, and he's amazing. But the biggest tip he has is like, okay, if you're doing a keynote, he rehearses, I believe, 1 hour of rehearsal per minute. So if you have a 30-minute talk, you should rehearse for 30 hours. And he says, don't just read the words, create body language for each minute, right?
Wow.
Be in your body and like learn how to use your voice. And he has a lot of free education around this, but I've just consumed a lot of that. Listen to Chris Do, try to be personal, try to like get one-on-one with someone, and I try to share energy. I'm like, I'm here for this one person in the crowd, and I hope I can help them. It helps me a lot, and it takes away the nerves.
I think that's excellent. You don't have to picture the room naked. Really just get to.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah, that is a bad idea. Then you start looking at certain people. All right, a little personal life about you, Dain. You mentioned you have a daughter. Do you have one child or two kids? Two daughters?
Yeah.
Or?
No, I got a boy and a girl. So Harlow, she's 3, and Joey is 9 months.
Wow. Okay, so you're busy. That kind of goes into, I have 3 kids, so that kind of goes into the question of how do you manage all this, and what do you recommend for entrepreneurs out there, or for individuals that have children, are trying to build their personal brand nowadays on the internet at the same time trying to pay bills and so forth. How do you manage all that, and how do you make sure that your business has enough time and so does your family?
Great question. I think, it's certainly not easy, and it's certainly not for everyone. Raising little kids and building a business at the same time, it's tough, man. But like myself and my partner, Ellie, she's extremely understanding, and like, she's been with me for 7 years, man. Like we used to like sleep on a mattress on a floor together, broke, and like share our debt and like budget our week together. Like we've been together at the very beginning. So like now we have all this amazing stuff happening. We're both like in just extreme gratitude, and we're trying to build a future for our children. So I think as long as you're in gratitude and you understand like, okay, I'm not just doing this for the money. I'm trying to build a future for my family. I'm trying to create opportunities for my daughter. Like as long as you and your partner are on the same wavelength, I think where there's difficulty is when people and their spouse aren't on the same frequency. They don't want the same thing. So you have to make sure you and your partner are like shooting at the same goal together, and you're playing different roles, right? So Ellie, like amazingly doesn't have to work, right? She can just be there with the kids. But she understands my ambition, my goal, and I'm constantly sitting down and saying, this is what I'm working toward. What would you change?
So you respect her. You respect her opinion as well.
We need to sit down and plan it together. We need to be like, what are we working toward here? And like, why are we doing it? And like, do we want to work this hard? And I think, we're on the same page. And, it's having this, it's being on the same page. Then the second part of that, I think that's really important is you allot time for your family first. So we try to sit down at the start of each week and we're like, okay, what are we doing together as a family, and put that in my calendar first.
I
okay,
see.
like I'm doing a daddy-daughter date on Saturday. I'm picking my daughter up. I'm taking her to like a playground or to the beach. Like I plan time to have with my children.
It sounds like I just want to add to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It sounds like you understand that you're doing the business for your family, for your daughter, for your kids, and you hope to pass that on or create some legacy. But at the same time, you know that planning first the family events are the most important thing, because what you're doing your business for really just relates back to your family events. So if you don't plan that, then it's kind of all destructive, in my opinion, and you wouldn't know why you're doing it, right?
Yeah, and I think, like I want to lead by example as well, and I want to make sure that I'm setting a precedent for my family. Like, you can do amazing things in life if you work intelligently. So I think, for me, it's important that we allot family time first. They feel like a priority, and they know something's coming up, so they know the next holiday is coming up. They know the next adventure's coming up, and I think, I try to get home at a reasonable time. I'm not home at like 9 o'clock at night, but like 5:30, 6 p.m. to like help with the children and make dinner and put them into bed and sing them stories. And like, I think they grow up quick, man. You gotta like, and I hear dads that are in the same predicament, and they're like, oh man, I go home and I just tell the kids and daddy needs an hour. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Like, you go home and you should be like in the door and be like there with your children. Take 10 minutes in the car, and then step it up, right? Because I think you gotta lead by example and be present. You have to be present with your children, because that's all they want. They just want you to be there with them.
And it flies, man. It flies. My kids are a little older than yours. It just flies. The Kobe, the Mamba mentality, Kobe Bryant, he talked about with his family as well, and being such a performer. He said, hey, there's family time and there's my time. And if I want to come home at family time, it's family time. There's no my time in that time. If I want my time, it's either after they're asleep or before they wake up, and that's what he dedicated. And I thought that was humble.
That's what I do, man. I don't have my time at home. As soon as I pull in the driveway, I'm like, I'm here for my family. I'm here to serve my wife. I'm here to serve my children. I'm here to be present with them. Yeah.
Good for you. All right. And just a quick question. A lot of entrepreneurs that I've interviewed and people that have run businesses and get their mental mindset to dealing with employees, do you work out, or is that something that's kind of hasn't been part of your trajectory yet? Like, is it a big thing where you need to work out before you get to work? A lot of guys are like that, and there's different wavelengths, of course, but.
Yeah, it's a great question, man. So like, I used to work out in the morning. I find the mornings are my most productive, like, mental time. So what I've started doing is I've started like writing in the mornings, or I make content. Like, it's just cognitively, my mind's in an epic place in the morning, and I'm like, I really want to like captivate that time. So I actually personally love training at night. It's just, call me a vampire, man. It's like at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, no one's around, and like Ellie's asleep, and I'm like, I'm in there just getting after it. I love that. That's like me time, right? And I think I've started going 4 or 5 days a week again. And it's been amazing for my mental health. It's been incredible for my stress. And getting back in my body and getting physical, dude, like, I've just noticed I got way more energy throughout the week. I'm definitely more confident. I feel better. I definitely had a season of business where I wasn't, but man, it's too taxing not to train.
It's almost part of that personal brand we talked about. It's like you owe yourself that favor to really not only mentally feel better, but physically and stronger and so forth.
100%.
Couple more questions. I truly appreciate your time. Describe your ideal day. I know your day it's probably with your family and the good client coming in.
Yeah, no, my ideal day, man. It's like I'm kind of living it weirdly. Like, I think I wake up generally at midnight or like 1 a.m. and I feed my little boy a bottle. He wakes up at like 1 a.m. and but that's a beautiful part of my day. It's just me and him in the middle of the night, and he's just like, completely reliant on me. I get that beautiful time with my son. And then I wake up usually to my daughter at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning. She runs into the bedroom, and we put a TV in our bedroom because like, we used to have to like drag ourselves downstairs so she could like eat a cereal and like watch Peppa Pig or whatever. But now we're We put a TV in the bedroom so she can come in and like cuddle us in bed and watch a little bit of television.
I have one. I don't know. Some people are against it. I'm not against it. I think everything in moderation is key. But that is a great, good moments. Those are like key moments, huh?
Yeah, we crack jokes and we giggle, but like usually we make coffee, we hang out. I love family time in the morning, and then I love going for a walk and like either listening to music, like just music's really great for my mind. It like really does things for me, and I like write notes on my phone, and I just allow my mind to go crazy. And I usually create a lot of really cool content. I get to work maybe an hour early, and it's just me, and I make content, I write, I creatively express something. Then I'm just like beast mode all day with my crew, like solving problems, diving in, workshopping, designing logos, doing research, flying to meet with clients. Like just getting into the I love the hustle of running an agency. I really enjoy it. A lot of people like you'll hate it soon, or like you'll get over it. I'm like, I genuinely love this shit. Like I'll do this for free.
Whoever's telling you you'll get over it or you'll hate it, that sounds like a hater themselves. You just keep going and
they've gone through the ringer running an agency and they're like, oh, it's hard. I'm like, no, you just didn't like it. Like I love the whole game. I love the hard moments. I love the struggles. I love the wins. I'm like, I love the whole sport.
You love the journey. You love the journey, not the win. I don't know anyone out there. I've had different businesses, and anytime oh, this is too hard, why do it? Nothing's easy, right? We're not all going to be millionaires with a snap of our fingers. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't happen. You're not going to be a success, personal, or even a great family person without putting in the time. So nothing's easy, and even parenting, that's not easy. It takes time. It takes time away from you, etc. But you got to do it. Last question, Dain. What if you could like go back? You mentioned before you were on the mattress with your partner. You maybe even some time before that. If you could go back in time, and you see yourself, what advice would you give to yourself at any point in time? When you're younger.
Yeah, I did this exercise with Vin. It was pretty moving, and I think like, it was slightly different. I wrote a letter to my current self, but like thinking about, like I went into the future, and I was like, what would I say to me now, right? But like going back to younger me, I would have told that guy to like just believe in his gut. Like I think too many times in the past like decade, people would come in and I would share my idea and they would contort it, or they wouldn't really quite resonate with it, but like my shit was great and it worked. I think it's just having a lot more confidence in my own ideas and just going for it, and like not seeking external validation from someone else to say that's a great idea. I think fuck man, I wish I could have learned that earlier. I wish I could have just had my idea and go, let's go. Like rather than, okay, let me ask some people what they think of my idea to validate if it's good or not, and then I'll do it. Like if I could just eradicate that problem, I would have done a hell of a lot more, I believe, in the last 4 years than what I did. I trusted too many other people's opinions about what I wanted to do rather than just doing what I wanted to do. Yeah.
So well put, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Definitely correlate to that. The gut feeling is usually a good feeling. And if the younger listeners out there, trust your gut, keep going and do it, right? Dain, it was a pleasure. Thank you for sharing a lot about brand building. Guys, check them out. Everything will be linked below, from your company to your podcast to your Instagram. Thank you so much for coming on the Ideal Hour, sharing these things. If you're ever in need of anything, you know where to reach me as well. And I know you guys are coming to San Francisco, I think, in the near future, or doing a tour. So I'm around this area. Feel free to reach out.
I would love to, man. Yeah, we'll hang out for sure. I think, you got a beautiful energy, man. Thanks for having me on. Some amazing questions, and just unpack some thoughts that I'm going to run with and make some content with, man. So I appreciate it.
I love that. Thank you.